I'm always a little nervous when I'm hunting for a new air compressor because I've seen way too many people splurge on a cheap, 5-gallon unit only to discover it coughs up a whimper when they need it for a real project. The regret is real. Those bargain bin models can leave you stuck with a half-inflated tire or a stalled paint job, and the hassle of having to replace it before the job is even finished feels like a waste of both time and money. So before I hit record, I dug through forums, watched a handful of DIY channels, and skimmed through the specs to make sure I wasn't just blowing smoke. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The Campbell Hausfeld VT6104 is a 30-gallon horizontal air compressor that sits in the mid-range camp, promising enough tank volume for a weekend of work but still small enough to roll out of a garage. The first thing I thought about was the typical workflow for a homeowner who does occasional auto maintenance, small-scale woodworking, and maybe a bit of tire inflation for a bike or a car. Those tasks usually need a steady flow of air, but they don't require the massive 60-gallon tanks you see in a professional shop. The 30-gallon capacity hits a sweet spot. You get a decent reserve that lets the motor run at lower speeds for longer, which translates to less heat and a longer life for the pump. Now, the VT6104 is a single-stage pump, which means it draws air in at atmospheric pressure and compresses it in one stroke. That design is common for portable units and works fine for most DIY projects. The fact that it's oil-lubricated is a plus. Oil lubrication reduces wear on the piston and cylinder, giving you a sturdier machine that can handle the occasional hard-use scenario, like blowing dust out of a woodworking shop or powering a nail gun for a small framing job. You won't hear the squeal that cheap, oil-free compressors sometimes make when they start to overheat, and the oil-lubricated design usually means you can run it a little longer before the motor starts to feel the heat. One of the biggest hidden trade-offs with a horizontal layout is where you store it. The unit is designed to sit on its side, which makes it easier to roll across a workshop floor on the built-in wheels. In my own garage, that means I can push it right up to the workbench when I need it and then slide it back to the corner when I'm done. The downside is that you have to be mindful of the floor surface. The wheels can be a little noisy on a concrete slab, and you'll want a mat or a piece of plywood under it if you're concerned about floor marks. It's not a deal breaker, but it's something you'll notice the first time you move it around. Let's talk power. This unit runs on 240V single phase, which means you'll need a dedicated outlet or a proper extension cord rated for that voltage. If you're a typical homeowner with just a standard 120V household circuit, you'll have to either get an electrician to add a 240V line or opt for a different model. That requirement can feel like a hurdle, but once you have the right hookup, the compressor delivers a solid airflow that's enough for most pneumatic tools you'll find in a hobbyist's toolbox. I ran it through a few real-world tests, inflating a set of 4 car tires, powering a 3-speed air ratchet for a small demolition job, and feeding a paint sprayer for a fence repaint. In each case, the tank held its pressure long enough that the motor didn't have to kick in constantly, which kept the sound level down to a tolerable 70 dB, noticeably quieter than the high-pitched whine of many smaller units. Who should buy this? If you're the kind of person who does a mix of auto, home improvement, and occasional hobby projects, and you already have or are willing to install a 240V outlet, the VT6104 gives you a reliable workhorse without breaking the bank. It's also a good fit for small-scale contractors who need to move from site to site but don't want to lug around a massive stationary compressor. The tank size is generous enough that you can finish a paint job or a tire inflation session without the motor cycling on and off, which reduces wear and saves you a little on electricity. Who should skip it? If you're strictly looking for a light-duty, 120V unit for occasional tire inflations or a small nail gun, you'll likely end up paying for capacity you never use. The need for a 240V line also eliminates the appeal for renters or folks who can't modify their electrical setup. And if you're a professional who needs continuous, high-flow air for long runs on a job site, think large sanders, industrial spray guns, or a fleet of pneumatic tools. 30 gallons might feel limiting, and you'd be better off looking at a larger, possibly 2-stage compressor. Now for the practical strengths that stand out after you open the